Hey guys, welcome to the Bin Zone. On today's video, we're talking Squid Games, more specifically Kang Sae-byeok. So if you haven't seen Squid Games, spoilers ahead, you have been warned. Now let's dive into the video. So on today's video, we're talking about Kang Sae-byeok, who is ultimately the tragic hero of Squid Games. While Gi-yeon might come off as the hero, the one who actually is the most altruistic character in all of Squid Games is Sae-byeok, because of her circumstances and how she ends up being here. And ultimately, Sae-byeok is the reason why our main character Gi-yeon ends up in the Squid Games, because even though Gi-yeon was a gambler and he'd inevitably end up in Squid Games, she was the one who ran into him at the casino, pickpocketed him, which had him owing the gangsters money, and then he had to promise to sell off an organ to them if he didn't deliver the money. And that got him desperate enough, so when the recruiter actually came and recruited Gi-yeon, he joined the Squid Games. And ultimately that chain of events gets started because of Sae-byeok pickpocketing Gi-yeon in the first place, causing all this to happen. So she is somewhat the character who starts it off, and she is the character who has a major character growth throughout this entirety of Squid Game, because her backstory is pretty tragic. While playing marbles to player 240, we get a look at her backstory, because up until that point, really, we never knew her name. She's one of the main characters who's been with us in the story for the longest, but we, the audience, never knew her name. Neither did the other contestants. And that just goes to show her character as a whole because of her backstory. You see, she comes from North Korea. And I don't know if you know anything about North Korea, but it's a terrible place to live, being ran by a fanatical dictator. So the people who are born there, born and die in abject poverty. And when she was a child, there was a plague that ravaged her village, and she watched her grandparents and many other people die throughout that plague. So the character at a young age is already being experienced the extreme poverty, as well as seeing harsh conditions of death and people not having money for medicine, and not just money for medicine, but food and also all these other things. So her worldview already is at a disadvantage when it comes to the other characters, because she is truly from abject poverty. While everyone who comes to the Squid Games ultimately came for the money, they came because of their own doing, whether it's gambling the money away, all types of debt. Most of our characters are straddled with debt. Her thing though is it not necessarily debt itself, but she's escaping poverty. So she's looking for opportunity that she never got, that the other characters around her, all of them who are in the games, had the opportunity, being born in South Korea for the most part, Alina included, rest in peace. But they all had a chance to make something of themselves, but she never got that opportunity because of her circumstances. So off rip, her worldview is going to be different than theirs, and her seeing her grandparents die at such an early age, and then when her family gets with a broker and they try to leave North Korea, defect, and come to South Korea, while they're escaping, her father shot in front of her, her mother gets caught in China, and when her and her little brother finally get to South Korea, her little brother is taken away from her and put in an orphanage. So ultimately, in this quest for a better life, she ends up all alone. So when she's introduced to the rest of the characters and we see her not really being involved with the other characters, not really opening up to them, and given the fact that she's pickpocketed Gi-yeon and the fact that she's involved with the gangster dude, she had to do some seedy things in order to survive, not necessarily to get herself out of debt, but in order to provide for herself and her family. So coming from North Korea, it kind of shapes why she doesn't trust anybody, because these people have a known of privilege that she's never known. So her being here, seeing how they react for money, seeing how they're willing to betray and backstab each other for economic gain, while she's doing it to be united with her family. Ultimately, all she wants is to bring her mom in from North Korea, have enough money to provide for her brother, buy a house, and live a quaint and normal life. She doesn't want the money to be rich and lavish or get out of debt. She really just wants it to create a quaint life that she was never given. And North Korea and South Korea is a great dichotomy to see the difference in economic welfare between two social classes. You have the haves in South Korea and the have-nots in the North. And those two are pretty much on the same continent, the same island. They speak the same language. They're essentially the same people. I mean, families and cousins were separated because the country separated. So even families are one and the same between them. And it's literally a class divide. You have a line being drawn in the sand, and the people who have are in South and the people who don't are in North. So it's a real manifestation of what Squid Game is trying to portray, as showing the people who have money against the people who don't have money, and how the people who have money, the things they're willing to do to gain even more of it, and how the people who don't have really just want an opportunity to live a normal starvation-free lifestyle. So the have-nots just want to have something, while the haves really want to have more. We get to dive a little bit more into her character because we see after the first game, she's one of the people who voted to continue playing the game. Because as the announcer said at the end of the first game, if you don't want to play anymore, you can go. But the people who have died, their family members are going to get some sort of money. Her thing was never about her personal riches. Again, it was about her family. So ultimately, whether she won or whether she died, her end goal was to get the money to her brother, her mother, her family. So it really didn't matter to her how she got the money to them as long as she got the money to them. But as the story progresses and as she's starting to hang out with Gi-yeon more, because we see her being a loner, the night of the attack, she teamed up with Gi-yeon and his team, and we see that she's more than capable. She's probably the best fighter of the main characters in the show because she even tangles with the gangster a little bit, and you can see that she knows how to handle herself. So she doesn't really believe in the helping people. So you can see her distrust of people. So she realizes she doesn't necessarily need a team to survive. And that again shows conditioning, and that is conditioning on her part. She's conditioned to feel this way because the people in the South and the people of North Korea also don't have a kindred relationship, and she could see her differences and their differences. So it kind of plays at odds why she doesn't trust them and why Gi-yeon's characteristic is so drastically different from hers. Even though they're both very good people who are in this to help, they aren't necessarily sharing the same worldview. Hers is a little bit more pessimistic. Hers is a little bit more downtrodden, and she doesn't really believe in leaning into someone for help. As the story progresses and she starts to see the numbers of the other contestants shrink, and she starts to see the extremes of the ideologies against one another, when you have Gi-yeon on this side and you have the gangster or Sang-woo to a certain degree on the other side, she starts to see the errors and the ugliness of isolation and not trustworthiness. And by the end of the series, you see that Sae-byeok has come over to Ji-young's side, not just physically, but ideologically as well. After the game that would be the best suited for her, the marble games, which is the most non-cooperative game in the show, Sae-byeok sees that her opponent plays the game cooperatively and sacrifices herself so that Sae-byeok can use the money to return to her brother. And that's when her character starts to transform, because as she's sharing her goals and the other contestant 240 is seeing that she's not selfish at all. She's not in this for some crazy goal. It's just a simple goal of being with her family. She sacrificed herself to push Sae-byeok forward. And Sae-byeok's starting to see in Gi-yeon's ideology that you push each other towards your goals. You help one another because ultimately cooperation is the best way to go through life. Not dog-eat-dog world, not a capitalistic society where you just keep hoarding for yourself and while others suffer, but by working together, we can create a world where kids don't have to grow up in the conditions of North Korea. And her character changes, and you can see by the next game, she's actually on Gi-yeon's side. She's his friend. She's helping him survive the game. And you can see the shift in her character. Even at the end, when it was just three of them left, her, Gi-yeon, and Sang-woo, she stopped Gi-yeon from killing him. And it goes to show her transformation as a character, because she's not just thinking about, I need to win this game isolated from these other individuals. And she stops him by telling him that's not him, because she knows him. She's observed that he is the antithesis of her, because she is more of a dog-eat-dog. She is more of, I have to work on my own in order to get to where I need to go, and you guys aren't going to stop me from my goals. When she sees Gi-yeon transforming or leaning towards her former ideology, she stops him and tells him, that's not you. Your way is better, essentially. And ultimately, her character journey ends because she goes from being a loner to part of a group to actually telling someone to go against her previous ideology. So she transforms as a character. So that makes it even more tragic when Sang-woo stabs her and you're like, no, fuck. Because her character journey was a beautiful one. And ultimately, before she dies, she makes Gi-yeon promise her that when he wins, he is going to take care of her little brother and he's going to help her family. Because she made a promise to her little brother that she would never abandon him. And even in death, even though she's no longer physically there, her spirit and her mind and her heart is there, because she's the one who touched Gi-yeon, and Gi-yeon actually went and helped her brother. So you can see that she kept her promise to her brother, and Gi-yeon in turn keeps his promise to her. So her character journey is all about going from selfish, isolationist, to a more cooperative, open, selfless character. And that's probably why we as the audience relate with her so well, because she's not greedy. She's not in it for the fame, the fortune, any of that. She's actually in the Squid Game because she needs to. She's the most human of all the characters here. Maybe Ali, but Ali had a chance to leave with his wife, but he didn't. So she's the most human of all the characters here because all she wants is to provide a life for her and her family. Something simple, something she was deprived by geopolitical powers at B, something that she had no control over. And she was the embodiment of the downtrodden, the have-nots. And that's why she feels the most away from the rest of the group, the most isolated, because she is, not only is she from North Korea, she's not even close to the same economic standards that they're used to. And she had to do so much stuff to get here. She sees so much death and tragedy in her life that she couldn't possibly relate to the other characters. But you don't have to be able to relate to somebody to actually understand them and share their worldview. That's why she begins to lean towards Gi-young's side. And that's why ultimately her character journey ends. Even though she died, R.I.P., it was one of the most beautiful character journeys in the show and the most relatable. Her and Ali, probably top 2 most relatable and tragically beautiful stories in the show. But anyway, guys, that's it for this video. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and until next time, binge on.